The sun painted the Hawaiian sky in gentle pastels on the morning of December 7th, 1941, as Seaman First Class James Rasmussen adjusted his white dress uniform and prepared for what he believed would be another peaceful Sunday at Pearl Harbor. The massive naval base sprawled across the turquoise waters of Oahu, its 7 battleships moored along Ford Island like sleeping giants in the morning mist. Rasmussen had no way of knowing that within hours, his world would explode into chaos and America would be thrust into the greatest war in human history. Admiral Husband Kimmel stood on the lanai of his quarters, sipping coffee and reviewing intelligence. Reports that seemed routine. The Pacific Fleet lay at anchor in what military strategists considered one of the most secure harbors in the world. 8 battleships, including the mighty USS Arizona and USS Oklahoma, dominated Battleship Row, while destroyers, cruisers, and support vessels filled the surrounding berths. Nearly 400 aircraft sat wingtip to wingtip at Hickam Field, Wheeler Field, and other installations across the island, their engines cold in the tropical morning air. 6,000 miles to the west, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo paced the bridge of the aircraft carrier Akagi, leading the most powerful naval strike force ever assembled in the Pacific. His first air fleet consisted of 6 aircraft carriers accompanied by 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, 9 destroyers, and 3 submarines. Hidden beneath the gray waters of the North Pacific, this armada had maintained absolute radio silence for 12 days while approaching the Hawaiian Islands undetected. Commander Minoru Genda, the brilliant tactical architect of the coming assault, made final adjustments to his meticulously planned attack sequence. His pilots had trained for months in the shallow waters of Kagoshima Bay, perfecting the art of aerial torpedo attacks in conditions that mimicked Pearl Harbor's 30-foot depths. The modified Type 91 torpedoes, fitted with wooden fins, to prevent them from diving too deep in the shallow harbor, represented months of engineering innovation, designed specifically for this moment. According to historical records from the National Archives, the Japanese strike force had achieved complete tactical surprise through a combination of diplomatic deception and operational security that would later be studied in military academies worldwide. While Japanese diplomats in Washington continued peace negotiations, Nagumo's fleet moved steadily toward its destiny with American naval power. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, selected to lead the first wave of attacking aircraft, conducted his final briefing as dawn approached the Hawaiian Islands. His force of 183 aircraft would spearhead an assault designed to cripple American naval power in the Pacific for at least 6 months, giving Japan time to establish an impregnable, defensive perimeter across the western Pacific. The irony was palpable. As American sailors prepared for church services and officers planned leisurely rounds of golf, the most devastating surprise attack in American military history approached from the northwest. Radio operators at Opana Point had detected unusual aircraft formations on their primitive radar screens, but dismissed them as either American B-17 bombers expected from California or atmospheric interference. The sleeping giant of American industrial and military might was about to receive a rude awakening that would reshape the course of world history and demonstrate the terrible consequences of unpreparedness in an increasingly dangerous world. At exactly 6 hours and 19 minutes after midnight, Commander Fuchida's voice crackled over the radio frequencies of the First Air Fleet. "Tora! Tora! Tora!" The code words meaning, "Tiger! Tiger! Tiger!" confirmed what Vice Admiral Nagumo had dared to hope. Complete tactical surprise had been achieved. Below the circling aircraft, Pearl Harbor lay exposed and vulnerable, its defenses unprepared for the coordinated aerial assault about to descend upon America's Pacific fortress. Seaman Rasmussen was serving breakfast duty aboard the USS Ward when the first explosions shattered the morning tranquility. Initially, many sailors mistook the thunderous detonations for realistic training exercises, a tragic miscalculation that cost precious seconds of reaction time. The reality became horrifyingly clear when torpedo bombers screamed across the harbor. At masthead height, their rising sun insignias clearly visible as they released their deadly cargo into the shallow waters surrounding Battleship Row. The USS Arizona, flagship of Battleship Division 1, became the most tragic symbol of American unpreparedness when a modified 16-inch naval shell dropped from high altitude by a Nakajima bomber, penetrated her forward magazine. The resulting explosion vaporized the forward section of the battleship, killing Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd and Captain Franklin van Valkenburg instantly, along with over 1,000 sailors and Marines. The blast could be heard 25 miles away and sent a mushroom cloud of smoke and debris nearly a mile into the tropical sky. Captain Franklin van Valkenburg had been awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously for remaining at his battle station, despite the inferno consuming his ship, exemplifying the heroism that would define American response to this unprecedented attack. As reported in contemporary accounts by the Honolulu Star Bulletin, witnesses described the Arizona's explosion as resembling a volcanic eruption, with massive chunks of steel and human remains raining down across Ford Island and the surrounding harbor. Simultaneously, Japanese torpedo bombers executed their meticulously rehearsed attacks against the outboard battleships. The USS Oklahoma, struck by multiple torpedoes in rapid succession, began rolling to port almost immediately. Within minutes, the mighty dreadnought had capsized completely, trapping over 400 sailors beneath her overturned hull. Desperate rescue efforts would continue for days, as trapped men hammered against the steel plates, their voices growing weaker as oxygen supplies dwindled in the flooded compartments. Lieutenant Commander Joseph Taussig, despite suffering severe wounds early in the attack, continued directing anti-aircraft fire from the USS Nevada until physically unable to remain standing. His actions represented the kind of individual heroism that emerged from the chaos and destruction of that terrible morning. The Nevada, uniquely among the battleships present, managed to get underway during the attack but was deliberately beached to prevent her from sinking in the main shipping channel. Fighter pilots from the second wave attack, led by Lieutenant Commander Shigekazu Shimazaki, concentrated their attention on the airfield surrounding Pearl Harbor. At Wheeler Field, Hickam Field, and Kaneohe Naval Air Station, American aircraft sat arranged in neat rows, ostensibly to prevent sabotage but actually presenting perfect targets for strafing runs. Within minutes, hundreds of fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance aircraft were burning wrecks, eliminating any possibility of immediate aerial retaliation. The coordination and precision of the Japanese attack reflected months of intensive planning and preparation that American intelligence services had failed to detect or anticipate. As smoke billowed across the harbor and oil fires spread across the water's surface, it became clear that December 7, 1941, would forever mark the end of American isolationism and the beginning of total war against the Axis powers. Through the smoke and flames that engulfed Pearl Harbor, extraordinary acts of courage emerged as ordinary sailors transformed into heroes within moments of the attack's commencement. Petty Officer Third Class Doris Miller, a cook aboard the USS West Virginia, abandoned his battle station in the ship's galley and rushed topside to assist his wounded captain. Finding the ship's anti-aircraft guns unmanned, Miller, who had never received formal gunnery training, began firing at attacking Japanese aircraft until ammunition ran out and the ship became untenable. Captain Mervyn Bennion of the West Virginia, mortally wounded by shrapnel from the first torpedo strikes, refused evacuation and continued issuing orders from the bridge until his strength failed completely. His dedication to duty inspired the entire crew to maintain discipline and effectiveness, even as their ship settled into the harbor mud. Miller's actions in protecting his captain and manning the guns would later earn him the Navy Cross, making him the first African American to receive this prestigious decoration during World War II. The destroyer USS Monaghan, moored at the Pearl Harbor Navy Yard, managed to get underway within minutes of the attack's beginning under the command of Lieutenant Commander William Burford. Racing through the harbor at flank speed, the destroyer engaged a Japanese midget submarine that had penetrated the harbor defenses and was attempting to torpedo ships at anchor. The Monaghan rammed and depth-charged the submarine, becoming one of the few American vessels to score a confirmed kill during the attack. According to documentation preserved in the USS Arizona Memorial Archives, Chaplain Howell Forgy, aboard the cruiser USS New Orleans, became legendary for his encouragement to ammunition handlers. "Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition." His words, later immortalized in a popular song, captured the determination of American servicemen to fight back despite being caught completely off guard by the coordinated assault. Lieutenant Kenneth Taylor and Second Lieutenant George Welch, Two Army Air Force pilots stationed at Wheeler Field managed to reach the auxiliary airfield at Halewa, where several fighter aircraft had been dispersed for maintenance. Taking off in their Curtiss fighters without authorization, they engaged Japanese aircraft over the harbor and surrounding areas, shooting down multiple enemy planes in aerial combat that demonstrated American fighting spirit, even in the face of overwhelming tactical disadvantage. The hospital ship USS Solace, clearly marked with red crosses and protected under international law, became a refuge for hundreds of wounded sailors and Marines evacuated from burning ships throughout the harbor. Hospital corpsmen and medical officers worked frantically in improvised operating rooms as casualties mounted beyond anything they had ever encountered during peacetime service. Navy nurses, including Chief Nurse Grace Hopper, displayed remarkable composure while treating burn victims and traumatic injuries under conditions that would challenge the most experienced combat medical personnel. Fire Controlman Third Class James Ward aboard the USS Nevada demonstrated exceptional initiative when he manually operated the ship's anti-aircraft director after electrical power failed. His precise targeting allowed the battleship's gunners to engage attacking aircraft effectively during their desperate attempt to reach open water. The Nevada's partially successful sortie became a symbol of American determination to fight back despite tactical surprise and overwhelming enemy superiority. As the second wave of Japanese aircraft approached Pearl Harbor, defenders had recovered from their initial shock and began coordinating more effective resistance. Anti-aircraft fire intensified dramatically, and several Japanese aircraft were shot down by increasingly accurate defensive fire. However, the damage inflicted during the first 90 minutes of combat had already achieved Japan's primary objective of neutralizing American naval power in the Pacific for the immediate future, setting the stage for rapid Japanese expansion across the Western Pacific theater of operations. As the last Japanese aircraft disappeared into the western sky, Pearl Harbor resembled a vision of maritime hell that would haunt American consciousness. For generations, 18 ships lay sunk, capsized, or severely damaged in the once pristine harbor, while over 300 aircraft smoldered in twisted wreckage across Oahu's military airfields. The human cost proved even more devastating. 2,400 Americans had died in less than 2 hours, with another 1,200 wounded, representing the single deadliest foreign attack on American soil in the nation's history. The USS Arizona continued burning for 3 days after the attack, her fuel oil spreading across the harbor's surface like a black shroud that contaminated rescue operations and served as a constant reminder of American vulnerability. Salvage operations began immediately, but the scope of destruction overwhelmed available resources and expertise. The Oklahoma, completely inverted with only her keel visible above the waterline, presented salvage engineers with unprecedented technical challenges that would require months of innovative engineering to resolve. Rear Admiral Claude Bloch, Commandant of the 14th Naval District, established emergency command centers across Oahu as reports of additional attacks poured in from panicked observers. False alarms multiplied as nervous sentries opened fire on approaching American aircraft, and rumors of Japanese invasion forces spread throughout the civilian population of Honolulu. The territorial government declared martial law, suspending constitutional protections and placing the Hawaiian Islands under military control for the duration of the emergency. Intelligence failures that had enabled Japan's tactical surprise became immediately apparent as investigators began reconstructing events leading to the attack. According to declassified documents from the Roberts Commission investigation, multiple warning signs had been ignored or misinterpreted by American commanders. The famous WINS message from Tokyo, decoded by American cryptographers, but never properly distributed, had indicated Japanese intentions to sever diplomatic relations and initiate hostilities. Admiral Husband Kimmel and Lieutenant General Walter Short, commanders of naval and army forces respectively in Hawaii, faced immediate relief from their positions as scapegoats for the intelligence and preparedness failures that had made the attack possible. Both officers would spend the remainder of their lives defending their actions and attempting to demonstrate that Washington's failure to share critical intelligence information bore primary responsibility for the disaster. The economic impact extended far beyond military losses as panic selling gripped American stock markets when they reopened on Monday morning. Defense contractors' stocks soared, while civilian industries faced immediate conversion to wartime production schedules. Rationing of strategic materials began within days, as the government recognized that total war would require unprecedented mobilization of American industrial capacity and natural resources. Civilian casualties remained remarkably light considering the scale of military destruction, with fewer than 100 Hawaiian residents killed or wounded during the attack. However, the psychological impact on American society proved profound, as newsreels and radio broadcasts brought images and sounds of the attack into living rooms across the continental United States. The myth of American invulnerability, nurtured by two vast oceans and friendly neighbors, evaporated in the smoke rising from Pearl Harbor's burning ships. Japanese losses were minimal compared to the destruction they had inflicted. 29 aircraft shot down, 5 midget submarines destroyed, and fewer than 100 personnel killed or missing. From a tactical perspective, Admiral Nagumo's operation had succeeded beyond the most optimistic Japanese projections. However, strategic consequences would prove far different from what Tokyo's war planners had anticipated, as the attack unified American public opinion in favor of total war against the Axis powers and unleashed the full productive capacity of American industry in service of military victory. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt received the first fragmentary reports of the Pearl Harbor attack while reviewing papers in his White House study on that peaceful Sunday afternoon. His initial reaction was one of incredulous disbelief, quickly replaced by grim determination as the full scope of the disaster became apparent through urgent telephone calls from the War and Navy departments. Within hours, Roosevelt had convened his cabinet and congressional leaders to begin planning America's response to what he would immortalize as a date which will live in infamy. The president's famous address to Congress on December 8, 1941, lasted only 6 minutes, but galvanized a nation still reeling from the previous day's shocking attacks. Speaking to a joint session of Congress and a nationwide radio audience estimated at 60 million Americans, Roosevelt's carefully crafted words transformed Pearl Harbor from a military defeat into a rallying cry for total war. His request for a declaration of war against Japan passed the House of Representatives with only one dissenting vote, cast by Representative Jeanette Rankin of Montana, a committed pacifist who had also voted against American entry into World War I. According to contemporary accounts in the New York Times, the American public's reaction was swift and decisive. Recruiting stations across the country were overwhelmed by volunteers seeking immediate enlistment in all branches of military service. Young men who had been reluctant to support American intervention in European conflicts now stood in lines that stretched for blocks, determined to avenge Pearl Harbor and restore American honor in the Pacific. Industrial mobilization began within days as manufacturers received urgent contracts for military equipment and supplies. The Ford Motor Company announced conversion of its massive River Rouge plant to aircraft production, while General Motors prepared to halt civilian automobile manufacturing in favor of tanks, aircraft engines, and artillery. Steel mills throughout Pennsylvania and Ohio began operating at maximum capacity to meet anticipated military demands that would dwarf anything experienced during the previous World War. The attack's psychological impact proved as significant as its military consequences. Americans who had viewed the war in Europe as a distant concern suddenly realized that modern warfare could reach across vast oceans to strike the homeland itself. Blackout drills began in coastal cities from Seattle to San Diego as authorities feared follow-up attacks against aircraft factories, shipyards, and oil refineries that sustained American military power. Japanese Americans faced immediate suspicion and harassment as war hysteria gripped communities throughout the West Coast. Within weeks, President Roosevelt would sign Executive Order 9066, authorizing the forced relocation of over 100,000 Japanese Americans to internment camps scattered across the western United States. This violation of constitutional rights, justified by military necessity and racial prejudice, would later be recognized as one of the darkest chapters in American wartime history. Admiral Chester Nimitz arrived in Pearl Harbor on Christmas Day, 1941, to assume command of the Pacific Fleet and begin the monumental task of rebuilding American naval power in the Pacific. His first inspection of the harbor revealed both the scope of destruction and the determination of American servicemen to recover from their devastating defeat. Salvage operations continued around the clock as welders, divers, and engineers worked to refloat damaged ships and restore the harbor's operational capacity. The strategic implications of Pearl Harbor extended far beyond the Pacific theater, as Germany and Italy honored their tripartite pact obligations by declaring war on the United States on December 11th. This decision proved to be one of Adolf Hitler's greatest strategic blunders, as it relieved Roosevelt of the political necessity of convincing Congress to authorize war against Nazi Germany, while American public opinion remained focused on Japanese aggression in the Pacific. America now faced a true world war on two fronts, requiring unprecedented coordination between military services and allied nations in both Europe and the Pacific theaters of operation. The transformation of Pearl Harbor from a scene of devastating defeat to a symbol of American resilience began almost immediately as salvage crews worked tirelessly to restore the Pacific Fleet's fighting capability. Within 6 months, all but 3 of the damaged battleships had been refloated, repaired, and returned to active service with improved armor protection and modernized anti-aircraft systems. The USS Nevada, beached during the attack to prevent blocking the harbor entrance, emerged from repair with enhanced radar systems and fire control equipment that made her more formidable than before the Japanese assault. Captain Homer Wallen, appointed to oversee salvage operations, demonstrated American engineering ingenuity as his teams developed innovative techniques for raising capsized vessels and repairing battle damage under wartime conditions. The USS Oklahoma, completely inverted by torpedo damage, required the construction of massive winches and cable systems to gradually roll the battleship upright over a period of several months. Although deemed beyond economical repair, the Oklahoma's successful refloating provided valuable engineering experience that proved essential for future naval operations. According to historical documentation from the Naval History and Heritage Command, the Pearl Harbor attack actually strengthened American naval power in the long term by eliminating older, slower battleships that would have been ineffective against Japanese carrier aviation. The Pacific Fleet that emerged from repair yards emphasized aircraft carriers, fast cruisers, and destroyers capable of the high-speed operations necessary for offensive warfare across vast Pacific distances. Admiral Nimitz transformed Pacific Fleet strategy from defensive harbor protection to aggressive carrier warfare that would carry the fight directly to Japanese home waters. The Doolittle raid of April 18, 1942, launched from the carrier USS Hornet, demonstrated renewed American offensive capability by bombing Japanese cities including Tokyo, Yokohama, and Nagoya. Although causing minimal physical damage, the psychological impact on Japanese morale was profound, proving that their homeland remained vulnerable to American retaliation. The Battle of Midway, fought from June 4 to 7, 1942, marked the decisive turning point in Pacific warfare as American naval aviation destroyed 4 Japanese aircraft carriers and eliminated many of Japan's most experienced pilots. This victory was made possible by intelligence breakthroughs that allowed Admiral Nimitz to position his forces for maximum tactical advantage, demonstrating how lessons learned from Pearl Harbor had improved American military effectiveness and coordination. Industrial production reached unprecedented levels as American factories converted to wartime manufacturing schedules that operated 24 hours daily throughout the war years. Shipyards in California, Virginia, and Maine launched new vessels at a rate that astounded both allies and enemies, replacing Pearl Harbor losses within months and continuing production that would ultimately give America the largest navy in world history. Aircraft production increased even more dramatically as plants in Seattle, Los Angeles, and Detroit delivered fighters, bombers, and transport planes that equipped not only American forces but allied nations worldwide. The memorial constructed over the sunken USS Arizona became a symbol of American remembrance and renewed commitment to defending democratic values against totalitarian aggression. Dedicated on Memorial Day, 1962, the memorial preserves the memory of those who died during the attack while serving as a reminder that freedom requires constant vigilance and sacrifice. Oil still seeps from the Arizona's fuel tanks, creating what veterans call black tears that honor the memory of shipmates who remain entombed within the battleship's hull. Pearl Harbor's legacy extends far beyond military history to encompass fundamental changes in American foreign policy, defense preparedness, and national consciousness. The attack ended American isolationism permanently, establishing the United States as a global superpower committed to maintaining international peace and security through military strength and alliance systems. Modern American defense strategy, emphasizing forward deployment and advanced intelligence capabilities, reflects lessons learned from the devastating surprise attack that awakened the sleeping giant of American military and industrial power on that infamous Sunday morning in 1941.